So, I'm kind of making this video essay to kind of talk about my kind of views on how we as a society kind of think that everybody should have to be super intelligent or successful or reach a high level of education in order to kind of be more valuable as a person. And then I also want to bring up some of the downsides of being highly intelligent. And I feel like I'm qualified to speak on this because I, I was tested with a IQ of 140. And aside from that, I took my first college class before I even started high school. I'm actually going to graduate with my associate's degree at the end of this year, and I'm in my junior year of high school. Um, and my father is very intelligent, and I know a lot of very intelligent, high IQ people, and I think all of those kind of have given me experience with personal experience knowing how it is, but also seeing what it's like for a lot of other people. And I think that's why I can really talk about some of this stuff. And so I think the first thing I want to talk about is that we kind of don't like care really what we're meant to do. A lot of people kind of place an emphasis on you have to be successful or you have to do this or that. Like, there's always the stereotype of saying that you need to be a doctor, lawyer, or engineer. And those are the three careers you can have, or else you're not successful. And I don't think that's good. And I don't think, uh, if you really think about it, could you really have a society of just doctors, lawyers, and engineers? No, no, it wouldn't be a very successful society because we need a diverse workforce, but we also just need diversity in traits and personality types and people and abilities and everything. We can't have the same type of people. We can't have three types of people. You have to choose to be type A, B, or C. Like that's not how A people work, but that's not how people should have to work either. Because no one will ever be happy trying to be someone that they're not. And I think we kind of forget about that in that we tell people, okay, you need to get higher education. You need to go to university, and that's what you need to do. You need to go get your bachelor's degree or else you're not successful. And I don't think that's a good thing. And the U.S. currently is suffering from that because like everyone has a bachelor's degree now. Not everybody, but most people. And if you don't have a bachelor's degree, then it's kind of hard to do anything because now it's like a basic requirement. And it's not really helping a lot of people because now, because it's a basic requirement, the wage is so much lower. That's also due to just how other things. But because everybody is overqualified, they're having to do entry level positions where 50 years ago they would have gotten a much higher paying job. They would have gotten a better position than what we have now because it's now okay, nothing sets you apart from everyone else because that's just the bare minimum now. And 50 years ago it's oh, you have a bachelor's degree, that's really good, you're really qualified. And now it's okay, so where's your master's and that's not good. And aside from that, student debt, everything that American students are facing. And there's also the trade worker shortage, and especially Germany's facing this hard, and I anticipate that America will if not, we already are, and probably every other country at some point, unless we kind of change what we're thinking. And because, like, Germany, it's the same thing of the emphasis on getting higher education, going to universities, getting like your bachelor's degree. And because everybody's like overqualified, they're not working in like any trade jobs. There's a shortage of like welders, electricians, taxi drivers. That's a huge problem in Germany, and it's probably going to get there here. And so that's really not something we should want to go to. And I don't think it is. I don't think any of us really want to go to like having like worker shortages. But that's kind of what we're unintentionally supporting and kind of really talking like for, because we're saying, okay, you should go to like university, but like we're never telling people that you should go to trade school. I mean, it's very rare that to see people say that. And oh, look, everybody's going to university instead of trade school, which is not good, because just like how like doctors and lawyers and engineers are all valuable for our society, like electricians, plumbers, welders, like taxi drivers, retail workers, all those people, and many like other like lesser jobs are all very valuable, and that's like actually like the basis of society, because without these people, like we're not gonna like society won't function, and we're kind of telling people to not do that, and that's not good. So like that's just not something I'm happy with, because in the end it's not a benefit to us or anyone, because if you're constantly telling people that you have to go to a university or you have to do this job or you have to major in this or whatever, they're not going to be doing what they want to be. They're not going to like doing what they want to do. They're just going to like they're going to be living for others, not living for themselves. And that's never a way to get personal satisfaction. That's never a way to be happy with who you are. And like it's kind of impossible to kind of live for others and fake who you are and live as something other than yourself and be happy and be content with your life. And that's kind of a problem. And I don't think this emphasis on like being super intelligent or being super educated is really warranted, because like aside from everybody needing to be kind of who they are, because that's a value in it of itself, diversity of society is valuable. And so like apart from for diversity's sake and not trying to be who you're not, like having a high IQ or being very intelligent can come with its downsides too. And we kind of look past that generally. We kind of think, oh, you're really intelligent. Oh, like that's cool. You like it's easier to be successful. It's easier to learn. It's easier to learn more complex topics. It's easier to be innovative. And while all of that is true, dependent on the person, but all of that's true generally. It also comes with its social and kind of like medical downsides. There was a study done on Mensa members, and Mensa is a high IQ society, and that's basically where if you have an IQ above a certain level, then you can join this group, and it's meant mostly to kind of like talk with people or like meet up There's like an annual gathering and stuff like that. And so there was a study done, a survey done on Mensa members, and of the people that like responded to the survey, there was much higher levels of like rates of autoimmune diseases, allergies, um, and then also mental disorders like depression, anxiety, autism, and ADHD, and I believe also bipolar disorder, but I'm not sure on that one. And all of those happen at a higher rate. And that's not good. Who would have guessed? It's not good to have a physical or mental disorder. But I mean, that could partially be attributed to like outside factors like education surrounding medical topics or access to medical care. But it's these happen at a higher rates both in diagnosed cases and also suspected, because the study asked participants whether or not they had certain disorders and whether or not they were diagnosed with that disorder professionally or if they suspected that they have the disorder. And generally, like, the rates were higher. And there's a theory behind that it has to do with your, I guess, your brain and your immune system being overactive, which can help with kind of like being more creative and thinking new thoughts, basically. But it could also cause things like overthinking, anxiety. What allergies is because of an overreactive immune system. A lot of autoimmune disorders are like because your body like attacks itself. So all of that is thought to be connected, though it might have to do with like just like correlation, but whatever. So all of that is generally more prevalent. Occurs in a higher rate in people with higher IQs. Along with that, as you have a higher IQ, there's going to be less people that are around your level. So, because IQ is generally like represented like on a bell curve. I can't curve my arms, but it's like that. And so as you get to either of the extremes, it's less frequent. And so if you have a really high IQ, there's not going to be a lot of people. Who would have thought? Because IQ is just based around like average, and it's all just relative. Which is why, like, if you take someone who's high IQ, like 100 years ago, they'd be like average or slightly above average now. And so, because there's less people who have a higher IQ, it's harder to connect on a meaningful social level. Like, because you can't have as deep of conversations as like with someone of a normal IQ. There's theorized to be if you have a 30 IQ point gap or larger, you can't have a meaningful connection with that person. I don't know the validity of that theory, but I've heard it. And that's, you can see the same kind of disconnect of like, if you have an average IQ, it's hard to have a meaningful social like relationship with someone with like Down syndrome, for example. So someone with serious developmental like delays, it's harder to have a meaningful social relationship with them as someone with a high IQ. And that's a similar kind of gap or disconnect as someone with a high IQ compared to someone with an average IQ. And because everybody, almost everybody, is at that level or lower, there's really not that many people that you can like talk to or be friends with or like date. And that's pretty isolating, because if you can't talk with people, then like that that's not good. That's kind of detrimental to most people, to almost anyone. And that's like kind of like, oh. So that's something that we kind of forget about. And I also want to bring to attention that there's some times where you can be so intelligent that it kind of sort of like disables you. Um, and I bring up this man who my father was friends with, and he's in his 50s now, and or about somewhere like that. And he like still lives with his mother. He doesn't have a job. He doesn't have like a wife or kids. He just lives with his mother. And because he can't interact in society, he's much like higher IQ than almost anyone out there. So there's just like he can't really connect with anyone, and it's like disabling to him. And that's not a good thing. And most people with high IQs won't have to face that situation. But that's an example of what can kind of occur. Um, and I also want to talk about educational difficulties that some people with like higher IQs or high intelligence might face. And this kind of seems contradicting to the stereotype of if you have a high IQ, then you're going to be smart. Well, then you're going to be like able to learn stuff super easy and stuff like that. And it seems contradicting, but it's kind of not. And I've seen in myself, in my father, and in other people that we generally don't do well in easier classes and then do better in harder classes. And for example, like my father had, I believe, a 2.25 to a 2.5 GPA in like in high school. And then he ended up like getting his master's degree in aerospace engineering. So he did pretty decent after that. My like myself, I like in algebra 1, the most basic math like that we teach at a high school level, I got a C and a D, which is borderline failing for anyone not in the US. And now currently I have an A in AP Calculus BC, which is equivalent to Calc 1 or Calc 2. And A would is the highest letter grade you can get. And that's like, okay, that doesn't make sense for most people, but it's actually quite frequent in those who have a higher IQ. And kind of some of the causes behind that is that people with higher IQs aren't taught how to kind of study, because for most people, education starts out on this level, and then it gets up and it gets up and it gets up, and as every step of progression it takes, you learn, okay, this is how like I can review this is how I study all of this, and you learn all of these studying skills. And because of that, you're able to go, and as you're at a higher level, then you can go and apply all those skills that you've built up over time, and like you can study things. And people with a higher IQ, people that are highly intelligent, they're generally like up here. Let's say they're up here, and then this is like the baseline, and this is what they start teaching. Then they start teaching, and like a year, and then eventually it gets to here, and like this is usually like college, like mid-college level courses. And then once it gets past there, then I need to learn how to study, because I don't suddenly grasp the material easy. I need to actually review this. It's not like I don't suddenly know everything. And that's a difficulty, because as it continues progressing, you have to suddenly learn all these skills that you never learned to begin with. because the education system's built around your average student, because it can't be built around the random exceptions. And your average student is going to be challenged at each level, and then they're going to build up the appropriate skills at each level. But if you're never challenged up to this point, then you're never going to have to build up the skills up to that point. And that's not good. And then another thing that contributes to kind of not being as successful academically at some classes is also like kind of not caring as much about, if it's like a boring topic, a decent amount of people with higher IQs will like not care. They won't pay much mind to it. They will do like the minimum and get by. But then as it gets harder, they are generally going to be more interested in the topic, so they'll pay more attention to it. And so both of those factors contribute to generally doing better in higher level classes than somehow doing really bad in basic classes and then doing great in higher level classes, which never makes sense to most people. And that's kind of the cause of it. And so despite like, oh, well, you can learn easier, it's not just about raw like intelligence. It's not about raw ability, not for like learning, not for anything, not for things like art or music or like any discipline. There is some amount of raw talent that you can have, but without having the proper motivation and the proper dedication put into it, you will never be successful to the same level as others. It's kind of like if you have like, in terms of like academic success, and like if you had a high IQ, high intelligence, if you're at this level and then someone with an average IQ, average intelligence is here, well, if you're just kind of relying on raw ability, then it's like you're just going to be there. And yes, you're going to beat out someone with like average IQ with average abilities. But then when this person with average IQ goes and like puts work into things and is motivated and then like studies and can actually like is dedicated to doing this, dedicated to reviewing it, then they get to a level that is higher than you. And they are more successful. They can get to a higher level than what you're at because they put in the work for it. And we kind of ignore all these other things and we just think about, okay, well, raw potential is higher here, so that's better. Well, no, because it's also about all the like work and dedication that you put into things. And we need to kind of, I think we should praise that more, because it, like, everyone can try and put in effort and dedicate themselves to things, but not everybody does. It's something that people can do. Whereas raw like intelligence is not something that you can't really change that. You can't really make yourself be born more intelligent. I mean, you can certainly make yourself stupider, but like you can't make yourself different than as you are, but you can put in the effort to be better at something, or like anything really, and we need to praise the effort in kind of how people have progressed rather than kind of naturally what you're at. And that's kind of part of my problem of why we always think that intelligence is the greatest thing, because it's kind of like, yeah, it's nice to get a step up, but like it doesn't necessarily make you better. Well, it doesn't make you better as a person, but won't guarantee your success over someone else. And we kind of ignore that. And that's not good. So those are kind of, I think, the struggles of kind of having a high IQ and being highly intelligent and above average, and also kind of the problems with society kind of overemphasizing that everybody has to be intelligent, and like you don't matter if you're not, because I think all of those are kind of wrong things. Basically, be who you are. But you need to be yourself and be content in who you are, and we shouldn't have to try and fix ourselves or try and be different than who we are because someone says that we have to, or because we think that we have to, because like that's not necessarily gonna make us happy. And I think we should strive to get towards happiness in being content in ourselves, and not just strive towards like either monetary goals or like general societal designations of success, because like there's of course like society thinks that being rich is successful, that having very high education is successful, that having certain jobs are successful. Society generally thinks that, and I'd like to challenge that, because what happiness or self-satisfaction does any of that bring when that's not what like you internally want to be? If you're trying to change yourself and that's not who you are or who you feel like you're meant to be, then you're never gonna achieve happiness, and there's no point in kind of trying to do that, because why do you want to make yourself unhappy, or why do you want to like why would we not want to achieve happiness? Why would that not be our main goal? And so that's just kind of something to think about. But yeah, so those are kind of my thoughts on intelligence and society, and everything like that. So yeah,